The young and the restless spoilers, the blood on his hands, Cane's fall from grace. The night was still, the Mediterranean air thick with tension as the coastal wind whispered through the old streets of Nice. A soft rustle in the alley was the only warning before the world shattered. Damien collapsed without a word, his eyes frozen in shock, a knife hilt protruding from his abdomen, blood pooling beneath him like a spreading curse. He gasped, but no one heard. No one except the man who knelt beside him, hands trembling, eyes wide, Cane Ashby. For one brief second, the world held its breath. And then chaos erupted. By the time Lily and Phyllis stumbled onto the scene, Damien's body had already surrendered to stillness, and Cane stood over him, frozen in disbelief. The knife. The blood. The lifeless body. To their eyes, it was all too damning, too perfectly staged. Their shock was instantaneous, but not unexpected. After all, tension between Cane and Damien had been building for weeks, sharpened by jealousy, suspicion, and hidden agendas. But no one, not even Lily who once knew every corner of Cane's soul, could deny the gruesome image before them, Cane, crouched over a dead man, stained with guilt and blood. In one moment, his fate was sealed, not by justice, but by perception. Cane tried to speak, tried to explain, but the words tasted like ash. What could he possibly say that wouldn't sound like desperation or deception? He hadn't killed Damien. He hadn't even seen the attacker. It all happened too fast, a flash of silver, a grunt of pain, and then Damien was falling. Cane had reached out, tried to catch him, but it was too late. And now, in the cruel twist of irony, his attempts to help were what condemned him. When the authorities arrived, alerted by a terrified passerby who had heard Lily's scream, they didn't hesitate. Cane was handcuffed on the spot, his rights read to him in French-accented English. As the police dragged him away, his eyes locked with Lily's. There was fear in her eyes, not just fear of what had happened, but fear of him. That look would haunt him more than any prison cell ever could. Back in Genoa City, the news spread like wildfire. Damien Dumas murdered in France. Prime suspect, Cane Ashby. The headlines were brutal. The speculation even worse. Reporters dredged up Cane's past scandals, his questionable dealings, his vanishing act from Chancellor Winters. They painted a portrait of a man cornered by secrets and driven by rage. They didn't know the truth. They didn't want it. Because the truth was far more complicated than a salacious headline. Cane knew this was a setup. Someone had lured Damien to that alley, someone who wanted blood on Cane's hands, if not literally, then legally. The motive was clear enough. Eliminate Damien, frame Cane, and let the past destroy whatever scraps of credibility he had left. But why? And who? Those were the questions Cane now had to answer from behind cold prison walls, with no allies, no leverage, and no way to prove his innocence. Worse yet, the narrative that he was secretly Dumas, an identity he had assumed under duress, a charade meant to protect rather than deceive, had now become a noose around his neck. The authorities believed he had posed as Damien's superior to gain access to resources, manipulate people, and cover his tracks. In truth, Cane had only taken on the role to buy time, to navigate a world that didn't trust him, and to uncover the real Dumas, whose power and influence stretched across oceans. But that context meant nothing now. The deception, even if justified, was poison in the eyes of the law. The interrogations were relentless. French authorities wanted answers. They demanded names, timelines, confessions. But Cane had nothing to offer except denials that sounded thinner each time he uttered them. He begged them to investigate the angle he believed in his gut, that someone had known about the Dumas ruse and used it to destroy both Damien and him in one swift blow. But they saw it as deflection. The evidence was too clean. Too convenient. The fingerprints. The bloodstains. The private messages between him and Damien, doctored, of course, but believable. The surveillance footage of Cane following Damien earlier that day, though the context had been manipulated. He looked like a hunter. And Damien, the prey. Meanwhile, Lily wrestled with her own storm. She wanted to believe Cane was innocent. A part of her, the part that still remembered him as the man who once fought for her, protected her, loved her, refused to believe he was capable of cold-blooded murder. But that part was drowning beneath a tide of doubt. Cane had lied before. He had disappeared when things got hard. He had secrets he never fully revealed. And now, this? Phyllis was less conflicted. She had never trusted Cane, never forgiven him for what she saw as manipulation of Lily and betrayal of everyone around him. To her, this was simply the final proof that she had been right all along. But there were things that didn't add up. Details that gnawed at Phyllis's instincts, even as she publicly condemned Cane. Why would he kill Damien in such a sloppy, public way? Why had Damien agreed to meet him in a dark alley in the first place? Who had sent the anonymous tip to the press just moments after the murder? And why had Damien been so nervous in the days leading up to his death, almost paranoid, like someone was watching him? The more she thought about it, the more Phyllis began to question whether this was just a tragic crime of passion, or something far more orchestrated. Back in his cell, Cane found himself alone not just physically, but existentially. His life, his identity, his truth, none of it mattered anymore. Not without proof. And proof was hard to come by when the world already believed the worst. The real Dumas, whoever he was, had disappeared. Any digital trail that could help was either erased or made to incriminate Cane. And yet, Cane clung to one certainty: if someone had gone this far to destroy him, they would make a mistake. They always did. It was in this darkness that a faint glimmer of hope emerged. An anonymous message slipped into the hands of his court-appointed lawyer. Just a piece of paper with 5 words: he was not your enemy. No signature. No explanation. But it was enough to make Cane believe someone out there knew the truth. Someone who had seen what really happened. If he could only reach them. From that moment, the fight shifted. No longer just for freedom, but for justice. Cane began to recall every conversation, every interaction, every strange look Damien had given in the days before his death. He remembered a woman in red who had lingered near their hotel, a shadowed figure on a rooftop days before. He remembered a name Damien had almost whispered, Lucien, before catching himself. A name not in any file, not in any database, but one that sent chills through Cane's spine. He wasn't just battling a murder charge. He was swimming against a current of international deception and long-buried secrets, and he had no choice but to keep going. As his trial loomed, Genoa City watched with divided hearts. Jack Abbott stayed silent, wary of involving Jabot in the scandal. Devon Hamilton tried to leverage his legal team to uncover hidden evidence but was stonewalled. Jill Abbott called in favors, but even her reach didn't extend far enough. And Lily, torn between loyalty and logic, visited Cane one final time before the proceedings. She didn't speak much. She didn't need to. Her eyes held the question, "Did you do this?" And Cane, though broken and exhausted, whispered the only answer he had left: "I didn't kill him. But someone wants you to believe I did." What came next would decide everything. Whether truth would surface, whether Cane would walk free or spend the rest of his life in a prison cell built not by his own hands, but by someone else's strategy. The pieces were moving. The trap had been laid. And only one thing was certain now: this was never about Damien. This was always about Cane. And someone wanted him erased, completely. The puppet master in the shadows, Cane and Chance's gambled. The air inside the French detention center was thick with resignation. Cane Ashby, once a polished executive with ambitions to rebuild his life, now sat on the edge of a steel-framed cot, his hands cuffed, his mind spiraling through layers of doubt and fury. He had stopped counting the hours since his arrest. Time didn't mean much in here. Not when the world outside already believed he was guilty. Not when the real threat, the one no one saw, was still moving freely in the shadows. His only hope now lay with the man who had put those cuffs on him. Chancellor. Chance hadn't wanted to arrest Cane. In fact, he had stalled the process longer than his superiors would have liked. But the scene at the alley in Nice had been too damning, and pressure from both local and international agencies forced his hand. Still, something about the evidence didn't sit right with him. Cane looked like a man trapped in someone else's crime. It wasn't just his denial, it was the way he seemed more scared of what was coming next than of prison itself. And when he uttered that name, Aristotle Dumas, Chance knew this wasn't an ordinary case. The name had appeared before. Quietly. In whispers through dark networks. A financier, a manipulator, a man with no digital footprint but immense influence. Aristotle Dumas operated like a phantom, always in control, always a few steps ahead. His empire wasn't built on visibility but on silence, leverage, and fear. Chance had never gotten close to him before. No one had. But now Cane was offering the impossible, a way in. A crack in the armor. The only catch? He wanted out of his cell. He wanted freedom, not as a condition of escape, but as bait. Cane knew Dumas was watching. Always had been. This entire setup was Dumas' work, the murder of Damien, the timing, the framing, all designed not to destroy Cane, but to test him. Dumas didn't kill for convenience. He killed for message. And now, Cane understood, he was being offered a choice. Confess and vanish, or resist and be destroyed. But Cane wasn't ready to disappear. Not yet. Not until the world saw the truth. Not until he brought Dumas out of the shadows. The proposition he made to Chance was risky. Release him, unofficially. Let him move through Genoa City again, free but monitored. Make it look like he cut a deal. Leak that he was cooperating. Dumas would take the bait. He'd never let someone like Cane become a liability. And when he came to tie loose ends, they'd be waiting. But for that to happen, Chance needed backup, and not the kind wearing uniforms. First, he turned to Kevin Fisher, now a cybersecurity analyst for the GCPD. Kevin had once hacked through Newman firewalls and cracked federal blacklists. He wasn't clean, but he was loyal, and more importantly, he was paranoid enough to understand Dumas' level of surveillance. Kevin agreed under one condition: he wanted full discretion. No official reports. No paper trail. If Dumas knew he was involved, they'd all be dead before the trial even began. Then came Abby, Chance's wife, and a woman deeply rooted in both Chancellor Winter's and Newman legacy. Abby didn't trust Cane, she never had. But she trusted Chance. And when he told her what was at stake, that Aristotle Dumas might have infiltrated parts of the global supply chain, corporate holdings, and even Genoa City's elite circles, she understood. She agreed to help by keeping eyes on Jabot, Newman Media, and even Tucker McCall, whose name had surfaced too often in whispers tied to Dumas. Her access, combined with her intuition, made her the perfect sleeper element in this high-stakes trap. Finally, Chance reached out to Devin Hamilton, a man who understood the power of legacy and manipulation. Devin had dealt with people like Dumas before, people who operated through family ties, emotional leverage, and hidden money. He agreed to let Cane reappear at Chancellor Winter's under the guise of negotiating a silent settlement, a story they'd leaked to the media. Cane, the man accused of murder, making peace with his former company. Dumas would see it. He'd smell betrayal. And that's when he'd move. As the plan was set in motion, Cane was released under strict conditions: ankle monitor, full surveillance, and a cover story so airtight it fooled even those closest to him. He stepped back into Genoa City like a ghost returned, gaunt, hollow-eyed, but resolute. Phyllis cornered him within hours, demanding answers, but he said nothing. Lily watched from afar, torn between disgust and concern. And somewhere, in a penthouse too expensive to trace, Aristotle Dumas watched it all. He didn't need to ask how Cane got out. He already knew. What he didn't know, and what terrified him, was whether Cane had something to trade. Something real. A name. A code. A ledger. Dumas couldn't afford unknowns. And so, he activated the next phase of his plan. First, Cane's car was tampered with, not enough to kill, just enough to send a message. Then came the emails, blank, encrypted, but carrying metadata that traced back to a shell company in Dubai. Finally, a package was left at Lily's doorstep, a photo of Damien's body, taken minutes before police arrived, with the words "he lied to you too" scrawled on the back. Dumas wasn't just trying to silence Cane. He was trying to destroy his last emotional tether. But chance anticipated the move. Surveillance caught the courier who dropped the package, and Kevin cracked the metadata. The trail led to a private offshore account tied to Lucien Marchand, a French arms broker and known associate of Dumas. Lucien hadn't been seen in years, but his reappearance now, even digitally, was the confirmation they needed. Dumas was rattled. And if they kept the pressure up, he would slip. The trap was set. A fake meeting arranged between Cane and Lucien, brokered through an encrypted app only Dumas people used. The location, an abandoned vineyard outside Marseille. Chance would be there. So would Kevin, Abby, and a Black Ops liaison brought in from Interpol. The goal wasn't just to arrest Dumas. It was to make him think he was still in control, until the mask dropped. And yet, they all knew the truth. One wrong move and this entire operation could implode. Dumas wasn't just smart. He was meticulous. He didn't trust. He calculated. And if he even suspected a setup, he'd burn everything: Cane, the witnesses, the city. As the clock ticked toward the meeting, Cane stood alone in his hotel room, staring at his reflection. He had lost almost everything: trust, love, credibility. But what he hadn't lost, not yet, was his will to fight. To clear his name. To take down the man who had turned his life into a war zone. The only question that remained now, the one that haunted even chance, was simple: when Dumas finally steps into the light, will they be ready? Or will it already be too late?